Good morning and welcome to SimWorld today, June 19th, Thursday edition. I am Marsh, joined on a Thursday morning by J.K. Candell with CBS Sports. Good morning, J.K. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Marsh. It's good to be back on this Thursday. We're getting closer every single day to the SWBA draft, and we got a big game six of the finals coming up tonight.
Yeah, let's start there, and then we'll kind of dive deeper. I'd be remiss to say, look, the Lakers are being sold, but I don't think either of us are financially savvy enough to really dive into this. I think it'll be interesting, but I think that's about all we got that broke last night. But I think there's bigger fish to fry right now, and that is the
Yeah,
SWBA Finals. Game 6 is tonight, where the Oklahoma City Thunder have an opportunity to pick up their first championship in franchise history. They are currently minus 6.5 point favorites to win the game. What's your expectation? Is Oklahoma closing this thing out, or do you think the Pacers stay alive?
I think that Tyrese Halliburton will get on track. I think we'll see a better performance from him. Should he suit up for this one? I expect him to. Like it is your season on the line, but I do think Oklahoma City's winning this. Look at what we saw from not just Shea Gilgeous-Alexander in Game 5, but Jalen Williams. They looked so poised. They looked so calm in that moment. And with Halliburton banged up and with the Pacers bench looking a little bit more inconsistent in this series, their depth hasn't really been reaping benefits like it did against the Knicks, who were running an eight-man rotation. This Thunder team is much stronger offensively than the Knicks were, much stronger defensively than the Knicks were. And I think we're going to see them pull it out, but I think that we're going to see Tyrese Halliburton give them a good fight yet again. I know that he's coming off that injury and a real stinker in Game 5, but and that's why the reason we're not calling him like a legitimate superstar is that he tends to kind of go absent in these moments. But I think that Oklahoma City's defense, they've been doing a fantastic job against him. But I think Rick Carlisle, he's been in this situation before. He knows how to adjust, and I think they're going to do just that. It's not going to result in a win, but it's going to result in a respectable finals loss for the Pacers.
Yeah, I don't look. I haven't been completely wrong on this series. I thought it was going to be an Oklahoma City win, and they're one win away from doing that. But I would be very impressed if Indiana wins this game. And I'm not really on the let's pile on Tyrese Halliburton train right now. I mean, look, the guy made a game-winning shot in an SWBA Finals. He was limited by a calf strain, which is not easy to play through in a game that's very challenging. Just it's not. Well, I guess any sport, calf strain is not easy. But now you're playing at the highest levels. An injury that probably would sideline him for 2 to 4 weeks in the regular season. He's now sitting there saying he can't even play at all. So for me, I just don't see a way that the Pacers have the answers on either end. Their defense has simply just not been consistent enough in this series. They've turned the ball over far too much. Now they're saving grace as they get to be at home. And the Thunder have not looked all that great in this series on the road. I mean, really, they should have lost both Game 3 and 4, but I've spoken about how that kind of was a wash considering Game 1. They haven't played well on the road. They haven't played well in Indiana in this series, and I think there's a very real chance that the Pacers can, in fact, close or push this thing to a Game 7. I just don't think that the firepower exists, and I think regardless of the health of Tyrese Halliburton, I just don't see where the second, third... Now, look, Pascal Siakam's been great, but the second, third, fourth options for the Pacers are just not as good as that of the Thunder, and that's really been on top of a great SGA series and a great last 2 games from Jalen Williams. That's been the deciding factor in this series, has been just the myriad of options from the Thunder. I don't see how the Pacers put enough pieces together to stay alive and push this thing to a Game 7.
I'm in complete agreement with you, Marsh. I think that maybe we'll see a little bit more TJ McConnell to kind of spell Halliburton a little bit, whether it was the calf or off shooting night. I personally think it was a little bit of both. But TJ McConnell throughout these playoffs has been incredibly valuable for what he's provided as that sixth man, or probably even that seventh man. But
yeah,
I mean, look, it's important to see how he does.
Yeah, T.J. McConnell is what really spurred them into the comeback in Game 6. That's 8:30. I expect it to be in Oklahoma City. Parade being scheduled through Bricktown and Automobile Alley in Oklahoma City in the coming weeks. Halliburton limited, likely. He's going to play through it, but we will see what that looks like for the Pacers. So let's head to the draft, which is coming up. It's next week. And the big talking point on that one is pretty much everything that happens after number 2. Because we know that Dylan Harper's probably going number 2. We know that Cooper Flagg's going number 1 overall. I talked earlier this week about Jalen Snow, and all signs are pointing to him likely being the number 3 pick. We'll see if that ends up being the Philadelphia 76ers or not. But the other big name in that grouping is Lamarian Sherwood, a guy that if he were to be drafted at number 4 would be one that certainly breaks some of the recent trends in the SWBA, a guy that's, I think, 22 years old, 4-year player. We don't see very often 4-year starters or 4-year college players go that high in the draft. Now, look, Jalen Williams is the number 2 guy on a likely championship team. He spent 3 years at Santa Clara. It's possible to spend some extra time there. But Lamarian Sherwood sitting there, in your opinion, what's his ceiling in the draft? Do you think he could go 3? Does he go 4? What's your take on him?
I don't think he goes number 3. The 76ers, they still have Joel Embiid. I think if they were to move on from Joel Embiid, I think Jamison Johnson is the more seamless fit. Lamarian Sherwood is a very back-to-the-basket kind of big man. He reminds me a lot of Andre Drummond when he was in his prime. He's an absolute mauler down low, but he's not going to give you much more than that. Philly wants someone who can kind of stretch the floor and do a little bit more alongside that conglomerate of guards in Jared McCain, Tyrese Maxey, still Paul George. That could change in an instant. I think the ceiling for Lamarian Sherwood is that following pick for the Charlotte Hornets at number 4. Mark Williams had so many health issues, Marsh, and it's looking less and less likely like he's going to be in Charlotte come October or November.
Well, they didn't want him last season, so
start.
Yeah, they didn't barely even want him last season.
Yeah, they literally traded him at the deadline, and medicals nixed that deal. Doesn't really feel like he's going to be there much longer. I think he would be a fantastic complement for a guy like LaMelo Ball, give them that true inside interior presence that I don't think he'll really be hampered by injuries. We saw him get hurt this year, but it was a bit of a freak injury with that whole Lorenzo Phenom thing. I'm looking at Charlotte at 4, and I'm looking at New Orleans I'm looking at New Orleans at 7, I should say.
Okay.
Because Utah, maybe if they trade Walker Kessler, but I don't know if I think they'll do that. I don't know if I expect them to do that. But should Cooper Kingy-Cross be there at number 5 for the Utah Jazz, I think they run that pick up to the podium. I don't see a way where you don't.
Yeah, I don't.
Maybe Sherwood's more of a need, but I'm taking CKC over Lamarian Sherwood 10 times out of 10.
You know, at 4 you're saying?
At 5.
Or at 3, at 5, if you're Utah. Okay. Look, I agree with that. I don't think that Philadelphia makes... I think that Philadelphia makes sense if you find a way to get rid of Joel Embiid. The problem is Joel Embiid's dollar amount. He's owed so much money on a contract extension that's yet to kick in that nobody's going to take Joel Embiid unless they're being incentivized to do so. The same with Paul George. That's why you'd probably have to use the number 3 pick to get off of either of those contracts. And I think there's still a very real future in which the Philadelphia 76ers look at this roster and say, we think we are good enough to win a championship. We are not that far removed, and we had terrible injury luck. Now, are they delusional? Maybe. I'm not arguing that they're not.
A little bit.
But I think that let's just get into the head of Daryl Morey. You just made a huge swing. Your preservation of cap space worked. You got Paul George. You're not moving off. It would seem uncharacteristic of them to suddenly move off of that. So to me, Lamarian Sherwood doesn't make sense there. I think he does at 4, and I agree with you, because if you look at this Charlotte team, you've got LaMelo Ball, you've got Brandon Miller. Mark Williams, like you said, not only was he literally out the door, but his health issues, I think, is a huge question mark. I think Washington could use all the talent they could possibly get, but I think Washington's sitting there hoping and praying that Cooper Kingy-Cross stays where he stays on the board and they get a chance to get him. I don't think Cooper Kingy-Cross makes it past number 5. I think he's either going to the 76ers, though all signs continue to point to Jalen Snow, and I think that makes the most sense. But I don't think if you're Utah, you're sitting there saying, oh, we got Keontae George. Don't worry. Let's take Lamarian Sherwood. Let's take Cooper Kingy-Cross. Cooper Kingy-Cross is the best guy there, right? So I think that 4 makes sense. That's the ceiling. And that's a team that if you look up and down that group, like Trey Turner makes a little bit of sense there, but it's another wing that can shoot the ball. Offensively, they'd be very exciting. But there's a lot of oxygen being taken up, JK, between Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball. Trey Turner, Cooper Kingy-Cross, both of them need that oxygen.
You need a guy
it doesn't
who's
make sense
them
there.
a little bit.
Right, Trey Turner and Cooper Kingy-Cross are on-ball dominant players. Lamarian Sherwood isn't, and that to me makes it makes sense for him to go there. It's a need, but also it's a schematic fit that you say it's not working on the outside. Let's go to Lamarian Sherwood and see what he can do inside.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that Charlotte makes a lot of sense. I think if Utah trades Walker Kessler, which I don't think they should do,
I don't think that's
it makes a
happening.
little bit of sense. I think they're fine moving Keontae George to the bench and starting CKC alongside Isaiah Collier. I think you look at Washington at 6. That's where things get interesting because they just drafted Alex Sarr in the top 3 in last year's draft. If you're presented with an opportunity to draft Lamarian Sherwood,
don't mess it up for
you to really pass on him? I think it's going to be really hard.
I don't think that you sit there if you're Washington and you say we took Alex Sarr last year, so therefore we're not going to take Lamarian Sherwood. I think there you have similar upsides, but I think Lamarian Sherwood's a better player. I also think we're seeing what's happening in a place like Oklahoma City. They're going to a 2-big lineup. Now look, Chet Holmgren's a little bit of a shooter, more so than either of Sarr or Sherwood, but you can survive with a 2-big lineup. You just need one of them to be able to stretch the floor a little bit, and there's probably a little bit of hope with the Washington Wizards that say, yeah, we think that Alex Sarr could be that guy. Is it gonna happen? I don't know if it will, but I think there's a way you talk them into it. But I think they need a guard and they need shooting. And please don't come into me and say that it's Koulibaly or it's Jordan Poole. Like that's not. Those guys aren't better than
I think
who's on the
Trey
table.
Turner is their creator there, Marsh. I think
Trey Turner makes a ton of sense. Let's go outside of the lottery, though. Who, in your opinion, and we can go lottery subjective. I'd say outside of 10. Let's say who, in your opinion, might go outside of the lottery or outside that top 10 that you think is actually a hell of a steal.
There's a few names that stand out to me, Martian.
Okay.
The first one is a guy who really shined in Hoopsteria, and that's Caden Shipp with Gonzaga.
Okay.
Very highly touted recruit coming out of SimWorld Prep. And Caden Shipp is a guy that you can kind of play. You can play guard. You can play wing. If you watched Hoopsteria, he is a straight up shot maker. He's got athleticism. He's got the perimeter game. He's a guy where if he's a complimentary option in say San Antonio at 14 or something, or Memphis now at 16. He adds a lot for those teams that like Memphis just lost Desmond Bane. They could add. They need a guy who can shoot. They need a guy who can give him a punch next to Ja Morant in that backcourt. And I think that Caden Shipp makes a lot of sense. And the other name that I'm really looking at is Kadarius Loftus. 40% from deep, good playmaker, good shot creator. It's a guy where if you're a contending team that's adding him to your bench, that is incredibly, incredibly valuable because that is a player who probably could be a lottery talent in a lot of drafts. Kadarius Loftus, he's younger, he's only exiting his sophomore season, and I think that's another guy where I think Memphis will take a long, hard look at them, and it's a guy who can help a team that's trying to get to the conference finals, get to the finals, can make an instant impact. Both Shipp and Kadarius Loftus are those guys for me.
I've got one name that to me makes the most sense. Ship, I think, Ship. I like the Ship pick, but I'm actually gonna give you two names. The first is Pooh Lewis. I thought he had a fantastic hoops area. I think he's a fantastic shot creator. There's still room for him to improve as a shooter, as a ball handler, but he checks a lot of boxes as a two-way wing. Right? He's serviceable on the defensive end. He's not elite, but he certainly has a lot of great attributes. But to me, if I'm going outside the lottery, and I think this is like a fringe outside the lottery, and I'm looking at ESPN's last mock draft to see where he went. It's Gerald Carroll. Elite shooter. He's a elite defender. He's one of the few guys in this league, in this draft class, I should say, that profiles as a bona fide two-way wing defender. Talking to executives, there's like five or six guys really that the league says we really trust him as an elite defender. It's Gerald Carroll. It's Quincy Henderson. It's Caden Shipp, who you mentioned. Trey Turner. And
Tate.
Then what's that?
Would you throw Glory Tate in there?
From what I've been told, I don't think that Glory Tate is quite there. Now, I have always said I'm not, the end-all be-all scouting expert. That's why I always defer to the others. But from what I've been told and the sense is that Glory Tate is close, but he's not quite there. What Glory Tate does is he's one of the greatest shot creators in this class. I mean, there's a high value of respect for Glory Tate in terms of his ability to create on ball. And I've been told there are very few guys that rival Glory Tate. And the two that do, it's Cooper King-Cross and DJ Wagner in terms of on-ball creation. But what Gerald Carroll does is he's an elite shooter, and he's one of a handful of guys that can knock it down from deep. And I think we're going to see, and he could end up, skying up the rank and of the rankings and end up being a very high draft pick. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen, but that's what a guy like Gerald Carroll brings is shooting and defense. And if you look at Oklahoma City and you look at Indiana, what's been the difference in this series? It's been the play of Lou Dort, of obviously stars not included in this conversation, but it's been the play of Lou Dort, it's been the play of Alex Caruso, Aaron Nesmith, and Benedict Mathurin. Those are two-way defenders on the wing that can shoot the ball. Like Gerald Carroll, 6'7", 218, can defend 1 through 4. He's a hound on the defensive side. He's an elite shooter. That's, to me, where I look and say, yep, that's a guy that I think can carry this team over the top.
Marsh, there's another name I want to throw out there, because while I was thinking about this, I was also thinking of Gerald Carroll. A lot of SimWorld youth scouts saw him as just like the second fiddle to Jalen Snow. He is not that. You watch him in Hoops Dairy, he is a microwave. He is fantastic from long range. He's, like you said, a really good defender, has good size. This is a guy where he can be a complementary option on a very, very good contending team in the SWBA. And this is similarly to how I feel about Bam Wallace out of North Carolina. He is a good 3-point shooter. Mm-hmm. And he's a good on-ball creator.
Yep. Yeah, I mean,
he's a good perimeter threat. And I think that Bam Wallace is a guy where I think he might be closer to the lottery compared to the rest of the guys we've named. But he's also a guy where if he had went closer to the top 10, a la Zach Edey in last year's draft, I would not be upset or surprised about it at all. Same thing with Gerald Carroll.
Yep, Bam Wallace is a guy that I've made no bones about it. I love his game. Great shot creator. He's fluid with the basketball. Good defender. He's exceptionally athletic. I think there's some question marks about the intangibles with him, but I do really agree with you that walking in day one, he's a guy that's going to be incredibly tough to slow down and be a very high-valued pick wherever he ends up going. All right, JK, I appreciate you hopping on with us here on a Thursday morning. We'll let you go, but we will talk to you again next week. Thank you for hopping in, and thank you all for tuning in here on SimWorld TV, the only place you can see the game, be the game.